I'm curious first to get a diagnosis from you. What's wrong with the Democratic Party? Whether you can learn about what's wrong, what happened in the midterms last week.
Okay. Before I start with what's wrong, I'm not, even though I totally accept how serious this election was. I agree with Dan Balls of the Washington Post on how long-term the effects are of losing that number of people down through the states and in the legislature, and so this is serious business. Yep. But we should recognize that on election day, Hillary Clinton would have won by 6 points in a presidential electorate, and so that the dynamics that are there are not gone away because of this election or because of the bench. But for me, the starting point of this is the economy. I think the president has been absent on the big structural economic problems facing the country. And the reason why their ascendant groups did not engage, and the reason why working class voters didn't vote for Democrats in large numbers, was because Democrats were essentially silent on the economic issues facing the country, and that's the starting point and the end point of addressing the problem.
Stan, the economy is a big issue. A big subset of that is health care. We didn't see Democrats defending the Affordable Care Act very much. Going forward, what's your advice to Hillary Clinton, congressional Democrats, Democratic candidates in 2016? Should they start talking about how great the Affordable Care Act is?
Absolutely, and they should have done it. They should have done it in the last year. They should have. My advice earlier was, instead of describing the change as minor, it should have been described as transformational, which it is. This changes the entire business model, how people get insured. My advice early on this year was the president should embrace it, should give Ross Perot-type speeches talking about the changes in health care that have come as a result of it. And had he done that, he would have been in a much better position for people to have a stake in the outcome of this election.
Stan, a lot of Democrats, looking at the presidential electorate in 2008 and 2012, they said, look, the Democrats now have a very strong position with the coalition of the ascendant, with minority voters and younger voters. We don't need to worry so much about white working class voters. I think you think the Democratic Party does need to worry about white working class voters. Talk about what the Democratic Party needs to do to solve its problem with that subset of voters.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, the first step in that is to forget the idea that we're dealing with the kind of working class voters, that Democrats had to capture when Bill Clinton was there. As Al Fromm and I, worked on the forgotten middle class and are trying to address the blue collar Democrats, particularly in Michigan. You'd go out to Macomb County. At that time, women were not anywhere near in the labor force the way they are now. Now, women are 75% in the labor force, 75% are breadwinners. So when you talk about we have to bring in white working class voters, you're dealing with service sector workers, the large growing industries in sales and retail, sales in which women are playing predominant roles. And so as long as you don't have an old view of what the working class is, working people includes working women and men, overwhelmingly in service sector jobs, who need a whole range of policy support in order for their incomes to go up. And that's where the targeting ought to be.
Stan, is the Democratic Party's image with voters too liberal now?
That is not even remotely the problem. The problem that the Republicans have is that we have ascendant trends, cultural trends, religious trends, economic trends, which they are fighting. And so while those things were suppressed in this election, let's remember what they did to suppress it. They achieved unity on immigration by coming out against the executive order on the Dreamers. So they are unified as a party against the idea that the Dreamers should have legal status. They voted for its repeal. That's now a across-the-line mainstream position of the Republican Party. They will die as a party with that position. But they achieved unity and intensity and turnout advantage in this election with a whole range of choices, but those have consequences. And I think when we get a little bit further away from the election itself, we'll see whether they can address those. I don't think the Democrat Party has a liberal problem. They have a president who I admire, who has continuing to try to persuade the country that we are on the upswing as a country, which is true in macro terms. But he's got to come to terms with the big structural economic problems that people are living with.
Okay, Stan Greenberg, Democratic pollster. Thank you. Now it's turn for us to bring in Al Fromm, the founder of the Democratic Leadership Council. Al, welcome. I'm curious, you just heard Stan Greenberg say the Democratic Party does not have a problem in looking too liberal. Do you agree with that?
I don't think labels are the problem. I think the Democratic Party, I agree with a lot of what Stan said. I don't want to get into an argument as whether we ought to be liberal or centrist, because I think we all are on the progressive side. But I think what Stan said is very important, which is we need to have an economic message that talks to the people who are going to work every day and playing by the rules, and we just didn't do that. To me, the key for the Democratic Party is, one, to have an economic growth agenda and an upward mobility agenda, and two, to be on the forefront of government reform. Because if we want to have more government, we want more government initiatives to help people, and Democrats believe in government, we also have to convince people that government works. So it's sort of the twin towers of growing the economy and creating an upward mobility path and reforming government that I think are keys for our party.
So, Al, when you helped found the DLC, the big things you just talked about, reform, an economic message to appeal to working-class voters, and trying to expand the party out from being a northeastern liberal party associated with the old ways of doing things. Does the Democratic Party need that now? Does it need new ideas? And does it need to come from outside the party structure in the White House, a new DLC?
Well, I don't know whether we need a new DLC, but of course the Democratic Party needs new ideas. You know, because of people like my friend Stan, and we figured out too many ways to micro-market politics, and we focus so much on turnout. I think we focus too much on turnout and not enough on what we say. So I think that, yes, we need new ideas. They need to come from all over. I mean, I hope the White House has a bunch of good ideas. I hope the party structure does. But it is also good to have outside pressure for new ideas. Look, we have a real opportunity now to lay out an agenda for the future, and that's going to be in the presidential campaign. And I hope our candidate, hopefully it's going to be, from my perspective, Hillary Clinton, will lay out an agenda that is an agenda for the future that convinces people that if they're Democrats, they're going to get ahead, which is not what they're convinced of now. And secondly, that Democrats are going to provide a government that will support them, work for them, and be efficient and effective.
Al, talking about Hillary Clinton, you've created a good segue to my next question. You know, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that Bill Clinton, who's someone who you worked very closely with in the late 80s and early 90s and beyond, was a new Democrat through and through. Do you think Hillary Clinton is a new Democrat in the way her husband was?
I think that Hillary Clinton believes in the same basic framework that Bill Clinton did, with an emphasis on opportunity, an emphasis on personal responsibility, an emphasis on bringing everybody together. She's strong on national security issues, but as she looks ahead, the framework and the thematics, I think, are going to be very similar. But the specific ideas, this is a different world than it was 25 years ago. And so you need different ideas to talk to the kind of working women, for example, that Stan was talking about. So I think she'll be, and I hope she'll be, a new idea candidate. But I think she'll also push the values and larger purposes that President Clinton did.
Al, in the short term, before the presidential race gets engaged, your party will be defined by its leaders in Washington. Of all the members of Congress, are Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid the two best people to talk to the country about the Democratic Party being a party of reform?
Look, I'm not going to get into that kind of a game. I don't play in day-to-day politics anymore. But the Democratic Party over the next year will be increasingly defined by its presidential candidates. And I hope in that arena we will see the party lay out an agenda that's going to be compelling to the American people.